All right, so Wagwan viewers and listeners worldwide, of course, welcome to Frivolous Gravitas. Today we're going to be analyzing cannabis, its uses, history, and recent wave of legislation around the globe. For decades, the plant was illegal on the grounds that it awarded no medicinal value and that it posed a public health risk, despite the lack of evidence, scientific data, and, mountains of people telling them the opposite. We'll start off with Jordan here, my delightful co-host, going through some of the histories. But before we get started, I just wanted to make a quick disclaimer that we are not on here. We're not on here promoting the use of illegal drugs. We just want to spread some information, and for educational purposes only. We think that if people are going to go about trying it, that they should be well informed and not just be buying into a whole bunch of nonsense spouted by either side of the aisle, whether it's pro cannabis use, trying to what's the word? Sensationalize, I guess, the benefits of marijuana, or the negative sides who are trying to demonize and criminalize its use. So with that, I will let Jordan take the reins and give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, so we can look at, if we're looking at it historically, we can see cannabis coming from we all know what plant that is. We all know it comes from it's related to hemp and all that stuff. Historically, it's always been one of those herbs that people have taken, much like other herbs that have had an effect, a positive effect on the body, and people have taken it, for medicinal purposes for thousands of years. This doesn't mean that it's not, that it's, the best thing, and why have we forgotten it? No, we have never forgotten about this. We've also known about, things like alcohol, which had a, certain effect on us, although when taken too much, it can have dangerous effects on the people drinking it. But the same with stuff like opiates and opium, which have been around for a long time, and people have known that when you take, the stuff coming out of the poppy bulb, then you can have a bit of a trip. But in between those, I think more closer to alcohol is probably this substance, marijuana, which has definite useful effects, it's not completely innocent, but it's not as dangerous by any means as they would have made out. We were talking before on how there was the ancient order of assassins, which we probably talked before we started, where a sect of Shia Muslims were essentially, camped out on the top of a mountain and, sending out assassins, getting them high so that they wouldn't have their faculties there. Makes you very suggestible. It alters your state of mind. But this is kind of apocryphal, it shows up in Assassin's Creed or stuff, but there is a basis in history for it. Fast forward to the Enlightenment, when scientists, the proto-scientists, the natural philosophers were taking it to see what was going on, to figure out, what is this? Does it have any, positive properties? They were applying the scientific method to it to see what actually it was. Do we have an effect from this plant on our bodies? What is it? And you get some very prominent, what do you call them? People taking them. One that comes to mind immediately was like Victor Hugo. A lot of these guys in the French poet scene, as far as I know, were taking this just to, see something else, because they were trying to unlock other forms of creativity and just maybe even chill out a bit. But it was there.
Painters and musicians too, yeah.
Yeah. And it chills you out. And it really only became a negative thing. Now, opiates, in the 19th century caused a lot of damage, which is another episode.
We should do an episode on the Opium Wars. That'd be a good one.
We should. I do need to study about that, though, because I wouldn't mind giving like a full, like, thick lecture on it.
Yeah, I'm putting that in my list.
Yeah. So, but with marijuana, it only really became a problem around the 30s. And I'm not completely studied in it, but or as to the political nature of it, but it revolves around ideas of, prohibition, legalization of substances, and medicalization of like the new medicalization that was being formed around in our society at the time. So you get the birth of it's kind of a late stage of the birth of our modern medical infrastructure, where you have that exists the way we have it today. And I'm by no means an expert, but the result of this ended up being targeted. One of the results of this was that it ended up being targeted as a substance of, an evil substance that had deleterious effects on our society, particularly by a man named, let's see what's here, Anslinger. I don't remember this guy's first name.
Harry
Anslinger. Yes. Sorry. I'm
no worries. I'm just helping.
Yeah. I did give blood yesterday, so bear with me. Now the also give blood. They need it right now. So essentially what he was doing was you had certain acts that were coming up, such as like the Pure Food and Drug Act. We need to make sure everyone's getting the right stuff. There was an international opium convention. But this guy had come in at the 30s and essentially taken this up as his, cause celeb, and to further his political career, or because he, actually believed in it. Either way, probably both. He took it on himself to fight against this substance as a thing that harmed society. So what he did was he essentially cooked a bunch of books, and I've got some quotes here which are just doozies. But what he was doing is, getting pharmacists, hey, say this into Congress, or say this in this report, so that we can, show that the substance is actually bad. So the first thing he had to do was actually prove that the substance was, bad. So you get, experts in, and we see this happening today. The same, like everyone still does this. It's been happening throughout history. It's like, prove it's like that. Okay, here's an augur. He says the gods are mad at us. Oh wow, they must actually be. So
like we talked about in our last episode about drugs.
Yeah.
How the drug companies fund the research for themselves to suit their own means. Marijuana had a lot of the same thing, but it was usually authorities or religious sects that were promoting the negative aspects of marijuana on phony science, basically.
So
that date back even to the 19th century, though, because out in Africa, like Morocco and the British colonies, they were banning hashish use from everybody, including India, I think.
Yeah, Indian history is. I'm trying to. It's complicated. It's like.
Well,
anyway,
just want to make one point about that. Actually, India is so complicated for its borders alone. Like, if you try to describe an Indian tradition or an Indian culture, and you're talking about a city that has 3 different borders within the same city between like Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan,
well,
what's
Indian? Indian history is Indian history is really interesting, because at one point in their history, someone from the outside came in and said everyone in this area is the same, and they're all like, it's like if someone came into Europe and said, okay, you're all Europeans now, and they're all like,
Yeah, Ukraine's a bit different from England.
Yeah, so they're all like, okay, and so that's a bit weird. But moving on, I kind of want to get back into America.
But we should also mention the reason why America is important is because of their clout economically. That's a huge reason why a lot of countries banned marijuana, is because as soon as the US made it a felony, like a federal crime, then the banks, any banking operations that happen from an illegal crime are banned in the States as well. Mm-hmm. So if you're growing marijuana in Mexico and that farmer has a bank account to make transactions selling their marijuana, that bank can't deal at all with the US. And that's like a national crippling of their economy. So a big part of the ban worldwide was because of the US.
Yeah, well, to bring it up also, certain fascist regimes didn't look kindly on drug use if you were below the upper class.
It was haute couture if you were from the right class, but it was crime if you were too low on the totem pole or high.
And if you were in a communist country, you probably had more pressing things to worry about. It's like getting marijuana. I can't even get food. So the Americans so this guy in particular had been looking at criminal convictions and saying, oh, it raises crime. But like, another guy pointed out that, Dr. Walter Bloomberg reported that, in a group of over 2,000 criminal convictions, none. I'm got this backwards. He had actually linked it to criminal convictions, so the criminals were doing it. But what this was being pointed to was a very kind of exotic danger. So it was the Mexicans. It was the Mexican influence on our society. It was the Negro thing that they did that, we don't do this because so it was very actually a racist thing. And I'm hesitant to call things racist nowadays because everyone loves using this word, which is why I have to emphasize this, because this is actually an instance of racism. We use it too much in our society. And so when I have to use it properly, it loses some influence. So when I say this is racist, I mean this is actually willful racism, because
prison industrial complex and everything, trying to fill up prisons and taking tax dollars for prison contracts because they're privately owned mostly in the States.
Yeah, it's even. But it was
also indentured servitude because the prisoners could be put to work for almost zero pay.
Yeah,
so they made huge amounts of money by criminalizing something that's so innocuous. It's $10 for a gram. But if you get 3 strikes in the States for felonies, you go to jail. There's a minimum sentence requirement for getting.
I don't even want to think it's like, I'm hesitant to even say that it's that well thought out. I would venture that it is more along the lines of, I don't like black people. This will put them in their place.
Money's always behind everything.
Oh, I know. Like that to me, that's secondary. Now, beyond that, you get stuff coming out of that like this, like they essentially, this guy put on a campaign. This guy was more of a marketing machine than than an actual politician, because he started this marketing machine. Hashish makes a murderer who kills for the love of killing. So this thing, they were changing public opinion in a way that's would make Walter Lippmann cringe. So you get, and it's very racially based. So you get stuff like 2 Negroes took a 14-year-old girl and kept her for 2 days under the influence of hemp. Upon recovery, she was found to be suffering from syphilis. Or here's my favorite, because not favorite as in I like it, favorite as in this is insane. Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. What?
Brutal.
That's brutal. It's insane. And just because I'm quoting this doesn't mean I believe this. Think harder about your accusations if you're going to use this against me. There's more like this. You can find, it's also connected with jazz. So jazz, reefer, they were creating this underculture, which also coincides with what do you call that stuff?
It was the clubs they were targeting because there were so many black people in the clubs.
Yeah, and you get like zoot suit culture as well, also comes out. And so all this subculture,
to put this into some context, though, if you take survey data from all that time, even, well, we presume that it backdates, but white people took and use and consume marijuana at roughly the same rate as black people did and Hispanic people. But the criminality of it, white people almost never went to jail for possession. And when they couldn't get a known other criminal, somebody who they suspected or believed was doing other crimes, they'd fall back to the weed possession as a crime just so that they get probable cause for warrants to search them and all kinds of abuse of authority like that. So having weed as criminalized allowed them to violate human rights and civil rights for decades. And it was a huge power grab for the police and authorities and DEAs and all that, because they could use it as sort of this catch-all blank check to basically harass and assault people, to put it bluntly, without the pun.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. And this even comes down to the dubious etymology of the word marijuana, which we were looking up before. A lot of times it seems like Anslinger just picked it because it had a foreign flavor. There was a Chinese relation to the word marijuana, but there was a lot of other words for it, and this one just sounded good and it sounded foreign. So it's like, we're going to get rid of the marijuana. And what ends up being is you get this demonization of a thing that for 20 years, until you get the 60s and 70s pro-drug movements, which was dubious in their aims. If you're interested in some of that culture, go read The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by Tom Wolfe. And also go read anything by Tom Wolfe because he's an amazing writer. That's not so much a condemnation as in a expose of the LSD scene in the 60s. But what was happening was these people were the hippies were pushing for legalization of marijuana because they wanted to take it without getting arrested. Also, they thought it was good. Now, they weren't so much right about things like heroin, which I think we can all agree doesn't really have much recreational merit. But the reason we're having this episode is because we have found medicinal and recreational merit to this substance. And as a society and as an individual, like even myself, who has been hesitant and even was, I don't like putting medication into my body that I don't understand. I will talk to the pharmacist and the doctor ad nauseum until they kick me out of their office, which has actually literally happened. It's like, my time's over, go away, please. For
the record, there is medicinal use for heroin, though. Like even in UK, they still use it for C-section patients, like on a regular basis.
Right, but
as recently as 10 years
as a
ago.
Recreational drug, I take heroin recreationally. It's like, oh wow, I'm not inviting you over my house.
That's the point of the word recreational. It means not medicinal.
Yeah. So, so in the 60s, you had this big push. And then it was because the hippies were pushing this, marijuana became another easy target because of the whole hippie movement, which was, it became the counterculture, and the counterculture was an easy target. And you get that polarization that happened briefly in the 60s and early 70s. During things like the Vietnam War. So, just like you see today, you had that polarization, anti-Vietnam War. You get like the Black Panthers, you get, hippies, you get drug use, but then on the other side, you have pro Vietnam War. And it's just like this, that, and the other. So it's an easy dichotomy to make, and they took advantage of it. But the thing is that it hadn't gone away, even though all the hippies sold out and, the Vietnam War ended and the 80s happened. The thing is that marijuana hadn't been quashed. It was still, it was still thriving on its merits, even after that. People start taking cocaine and people start seeing the dangers of cocaine. People start writing songs about cocaine, and they're there, I guess. But, it's still pervasive. You get someone like Carl Sagan saying something like the illegality of cannabis is outrageous and an impediment to the full utilization of a drug which helps produce the serenity and insight, sensitivity, and fellowship so desperately needed in this increasingly mad and dangerous world. And this is someone who it's really hard to demonize in our society. I have trouble thinking about a vice this man had, and I wouldn't call that a vice.
I can't think of many people who had more positive influence on an entire generation of people. Like, the Cosmos is the birth of all of these science shows that we watch today, and not just the popular ones, but like the global ones on YouTube. They're all giving credit to Carl Sagan for the way he presented complicated matter to the public in an accessible way. So that stars and nuclear reactions weren't just black box magic hand wavy stuff. It was material reality, where we came from and how our bodies produce and synthesize molecules to become human beings that, function and operate and philosophize and whatnot. But Carl Sagan saying something like that at that time shows that his insight was so far ahead of his time. I mean, it's hard to overstate that.
Yeah, he's still readable. All of his books are still, some of the science is out of date, but his treatment of like, here's how a star works, and then isn't that wondrous? And then you can feel the wonder of science. It's just like, oh, it's just math. It's like, no, there's something there. And this is an appeal to personality and authority, but he's used it and he actually still produced results. And like, he wrote a lot of books that are still readable today, that are still valid and reasonable. You can still watch Cosmos, his series from the 80s, as without irony, as an educational piece. The science still works, and we've learned more, and you can take that into account. Oh, that's not true anymore. We learn better. This and that and the other, but there's still, the approach is still, for the most part, valid. And for him to come up with that while using this substance, should give you a bit of pause. Now we're getting into the very modern era where the debate starts to get serious, and the counter debate starts to become legitimate. It's not just people throwing up peace signs going like legalize weed. It's people making legitimate arguments in legitimate political spheres, and people taking those arguments seriously and more seriously. You brought up beforehand that in 2001, medicinal marijuana was legalized, which was lampooned in the media, but it brought a lot of help to people. Oh, my glaucoma, I need it. And it's just,
or especially cancer patients, like more than anything, somebody facing end of life at 93 years old. Really, what are they going to damage? Whose life are they going to screw up by smoking some weed for $10 if it helps them? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were forbidding people from easing their suffering for no other reason other than political gain or public perception. And it's these public service announcements that started, I guess, with Harry Anslinger, with the Reefer Madness campaigns where they show people going all crazy and starting injecting other drugs or leading them to murder people, like just absolute nonsense. But because it was illegal, because of these campaigns and because of the public perception, for decades, people went suffering with a really cheap and homegrown cure, or treatment, not a cure, but a homegrown treatment for very serious disease and ailments. And they were prevented from accessing it for no other reason than personal benefit by politicians, which I think itself should be more criminal than the weed.
Yeah.
It should be more criminal to cause human suffering needlessly than it is to prevent people from recreational use of anything.
Well, and it's insulting because there's that whole idea that it's a gateway drug, and it's like, okay, I've taken CBD and THC oil for insomnia, which I'm going to get into later. But to assume that because I've taken this, I'm doing it for, I'm doing it unconsciously, or I'm not thinking about what I'm talking about, or that I can't control myself from just, I've done this, so I might as well just shoot myself in the leg. It's like, come on, you're not taking you're not taking the public, you're not taking the electorate, you're not taking individuals. Yes, there are individuals, seriously enough and trusting them enough, see episode like 2 or something, to, moderate their actions. And yeah, people slip, but at the same time, people can also get up from slipping. Even if they do end up, going down a dark path, they can come back from a dark path, or they can resist a dark path. And that doesn't even mean that the line from marijuana is heroin. That mostly means maybe you're making some other bad choices in your life that have nothing really to do with the substance. Because,
and we should probably keep that into context too. Because realistically, if somebody's seeking help for something and they're trying other drugs, whether they're harder drugs or not, that's indication of a problem that's not being addressed.
Right.
That's a medical problem, first of all.
Right. There's a difference. Well, there's a difference between having a beer every night or enjoying a couple fingers of whiskey, once a week or so, as a Epicurean pleasure, and drinking to get drunk. It's like there's a difference between that, and that is that when you approach these topics without that nuance, you get stuff like Ainslinger was doing, and the even like alcohol prohibition. Well, people can't be trusted to do this. It's like, thanks for believing in me.
But what's worse is we can't trust people to police it. That's just fact. We can't trust police to police prohibition.
Right. Because when you make it an all or nothing issue, then, just don't do it. It's like, you mean just don't do it?
No. But the thing that really bothers me about it, though, is if somebody's seeking relief from a drug, whatever that reason is, whether it's emotional, it's not because they stubbed their toe. Nobody stubs their toe and then ties a wrap to their arm and cooks up a batch of heroin because their toe hurts. Like, you're talking about persistent chronic pain that's not being addressed by a medical professional.
Right.
And they're taking drugs personally and doing it dangerously because they can't talk to a medical professional about their drug use even, never mind the underlying cause of the drug use.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue to me, if it was a public health issue right from the beginning, or a security issue or police issue or whatever, right from the beginning, we should be asking, why are these people willing to throw their lives away for a drug? And that goes for marijuana too, because a lot of people can take marijuana excessively and withdraw from society, maybe miss some work or be less effective. So it's not that it's completely harmless, but it's like any other drug we take, not just alcohol, but like sugar. We have to be responsible with our sugar. We have a diabetes epidemic and an obesity epidemic, so we're clearly not doing that. Again, that's a public health issue, but we're not out there regulating people's sugar intake because a teaspoon of sugar is just as small as a bag of weed.
Plus, sugar does have very positive effects. If you are low blood sugar, sugar will actually help you.
It'll save your life. Yeah.
Yeah. And
so moderation is key, and you use that word, and I think that really needs to be underlined, because the moderation of any drug, whether it's recreational or just a substance used for a little pick-me-up or euphoria or a party, the point is the moderation actually provides a benefit to your life, even if it's just to have fun. We're human beings, and endorphins are released from our social behaviors, and our social behaviors our recreational drug use, including alcohol and stuff, can lower our inhibitions. So people with anxiety or depression and things like that who have difficulty engaging with other people, this type of drug isn't just about the high they get from the drug. It's the social benefit they get from being able to do things they weren't able to do before. And that's why we call it a treatment.
Right.
It's not curing the underlying problem, but it's helping them expose themselves to situations and people and loving relationships and things that help their underlying conditions, not the weed itself or the alcohol itself.
Right.
That's definitely not good for your body. But the benefits you get can be net positive if you do things in moderation.
Right,
which is why that's what often gets overlooked.
Like, I've never really needed, this is why I don't drink. Surprise, I don't drink. But it's not because I used to have when I was like a teenager, it's like, ooh, holier than thou attitude, but I was a dumb teenager. Well, that's a tautology, but whatever. But the thing is that I go to a party and I don't need, like, I'm at a party. I'm going to act as if I'm at a party. I don't need the alcohol to let loose. And I don't even want to be like, I've gotten the effects of marijuana on my body. And I find that, like, that's not the state I want to be in at a party. I want to be consciously enjoying the people around me. And to me, what I see a lot of times is the people that can't moderate the behavior, or they're just immature about it, will end up, they'll drinking just for the sake of drinking. They'll think that the drink or the marijuana, the cannabis, whatever, itself is the party. No. That's the thing that enhances the party. That's what allows what's already happening to be better. That's it. It's not the party itself. And it's almost a tool. And to me, when you think about it like that, it helps you moderate it. I don't want to drink too much. I want to drink just the right amount to enjoy this party, to enjoy my night outs. And I want to smoke just the right amount to get me. And you should know what that is. Okay, this amount gets me to sleep. This amount, and you experiment with it. This amount is way too much. This amount is the perfect for, just relaxing. And this amount is perfect for a party. You should know these things. I know but it's the same for drinking. Now, I think I'm going to try and segue in here by just the meta segue into asking you, actually, how does this substance actually work?
Yeah, well, I think to start off, maybe I'll just describe the plant a little bit, just so we know what we're talking about.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, so there's a cannabis plant, and there are very many different species and varieties, or not species, but genus of the plant. So you can get really big, tall, bushy ones. You can get short, stocky, skinny ones. The most prominent are, brain fart, indica and sativa, and then there's also like a robusto or something like that, but that one doesn't really have the neurological effects, so people don't generally grow it or smoke it or eat it or anything.
It's just not as robusto.
Yeah, it's like coffee. There's a robusto coffee, but I can't remember the name for the weed one. But anyway, it's not relevant to our discussion, so I won't even bother dwelling on it. So the indicas are usually like short, fatter plants, and they'll give you that really heavy stone, and that's the plant that usually people use to help them with nausea or sleeping, or if you're trying to extract THC, the indica plants have a higher variety of THC and cannabinoids, like all the different, there's like 1,000 different chemicals inside marijuana plants. The sativas are usually leafier and broader spread, so you can tell the difference just by looking at the leaves. The sativas will have long, thin leaves like this, and they'll be a little bit spindly and narrow. They don't produce as much, so their yield is lower when they're being harvested. But the benefit to the sativa plant is usually people feel more energetic from it, so it's more of a daytime thing. That's the type of marijuana you might want to take as for pain relief in the morning if you need something to help you move, say with arthritis pain or fibromyalgia or MS or something like that. Generally not used to help people sleep, but used with the indicas. Some people find a different benefit from combining the two. So there are also hybrid plants that are like 30%, 70% indica to sativa, or 70-30. And you can find all these types of varieties just from breeders crossbreeding for so many years. and farmers generally like to put names on their
Oh, they're always
what
so
do they call it?
bad.
Selective bred genes or
Yeah.
whatever. And they submit them to the Cannabis Cup and stuff for awards, and they test their potency. So there's this underculture of just farmers having fun with it. But at the same time, what they're also doing is advertising their products' qualities. So it's not that you want the strongest weed all the time. That's not the point. For some plants, that's the point, and they'll breed some plants just to be as potent as possible. But again, that's just how we farm for wheat and apples and everything. We want some that just produce tons of the active ingredient that you want, or the fruit from the plant.
Well, it's just selective breeding and genetically modifying it to get what you want, like pear apples, which are kind of tasty, but I prefer a pear or an apple. But the fact that they can make them is cool. They're there if you want it.
Well, yeah, and it's just like apples, where there's hundreds of varieties or thousands maybe even of apples. I know for sure there's hundreds of varieties of apples in all different colors, and that's just crossbreeding. Mm-hmm. And make no mistake, anytime that you do something specific to change the properties of genetic properties of an organism, that's a GMO. So just because weed is natural, if you're against GMOs, you're against weed, because you can't get an original marijuana plant anymore. It's just been crossbred so much, just like corn and maize or whatever.
Well, it's my favorite.
There is no original one.
My favorite is that with carrots. Carrots used to not all be orange. They were mostly, they used to be like that big, and they used to all be like purple. And the Dutch bred them to be orange because that's their color. Because of like because the King of Orange and whatnot, and the Duke of Orange.
Yeah, it's the same as we do with cats and dogs too. Like a purebred is actually a GMO. Anytime you get a purebred dog, it's because they've inbred it so much that it's changed its genetic and physical structure.
Yeah.
So with plants, that happens all the time. It's not dangerous. It's not anything unique or scary. It's literally the same as we do for all of our food supplies. So moving on, then, the flower is usually where the trichomes, the white crystals and the resins from the plant that have the highest concentrations of the THC and CBD and all the other cannabinoids. It's usually the flower that people are buying and selling. And what they'll do is they'll harvest the flower from the female plant and they'll dry it out. And then it can be either crushed up and rolled up and smoked, or they can extract from the resins just by drying it out and tamping it down on a screen filter and letting all the resins fall down below and all the little shavings stay on top. It's really not much of a scientific process. It can be done from like somebody's backyard or in their gazebo or garage or something. And that's why grow ops are so hard to find, because unless somebody has a huge body of plants in their house and stinks up the entire neighborhood, one or two plants could produce enough for most people's recreational use for an entire year. But because it's illegal, people have to go to drug dealers and do the dangerous route in order to obtain it. So the social cure of making something illegal and prohibition has caused more harm than the actual plant itself. Because by not being able to grow it yourself, you have no idea what other people are adulterating their product with.
Well, I can drive that in by asking the question of the audience: would you trust your drug dealer?
Yeah, with your baby or something.
Yeah, so that should answer all your questions. All right, and
a lot of times they have an incentive to make money because that's their job, right? So when they lace a product, like when they lace their marijuana to sell it for more potency, because there's enough people who want to buy a potent, because then it's cheaper, you don't have to smoke as much to get the same effects. So, it's sort of added value. But it's perceived added value because they're adding chemicals to get you higher so that you buy more from them, thinking that their product is better. So it's more dangerous to have drug dealers than to have a pharmacist selling it, or a head shop or something where they actually tell you the potency of the variety and the genus and the background and which strain it is. Like,
yeah, I'm finding a lot of the, at least the ones in my area. I'll bring my wife in, who knows all the pharmaceutical stuff, and I'll ask them about, what's the dosage and what am I looking for here, and how is this going to be absorbed by my body? And they'll just be like, it gets you high. And I'll be like, oh, right.
Yeah, they're almost useless when you ask for like advice for, should I smoke this or should I eat it? They'll just be like, oh, try both.
Yeah, I'm just like,
it's not that it's bad advice, but it's just that they're not qualified to be helpful in a way that a pharmacist or a doctor would be.
mm-hmm.
And that's sort of what you want from a drug. You don't want people taking it just haphazardly without knowing anything about the pharmacology of it. You'd want them to be well informed in order for them to make wise decisions about their own moderation of consumption.
Right, because they're thinking like their business model right now is much more akin to a tobacconist than a pharmacist. When a tobacconist is like, you are buying this for the flavor, not because it's like healthy for you. We know it's not healthy for you, duh. But like there is something pleasurable about good tobacco. Like I hate when people smoke cigarettes around me, but if someone's smoking a good cigar around me, I don't care. My asthma probably doesn't like it a bit, but it smells good. It's got a good musk. But with weed,
I love my cigars.
I know. I remember on a birthday like 10 years ago, you went up. It's like, is this okay?
Really?
I'm like, dude, it smells great. Where did you get that? I won't take a puff, but I'll like, it smells good.
It's like an incense.
Yeah, except not musty.
Danky.
I don't like incense. And it's just like, it's got a good energy. It's like, then how come I'm not enjoying it? But the thing with weed is that it has a has a chemical effect on your body. And that needs to be, and it's going to be different because every drug reacts differently to different people for the most part, within a set of, possibilities. There's a bell curve there. And I guess what I'm trying to say is you can't treat it like a recreational thing purely. You have to be treating it as, a bit scientifically. And that's kind of one of the things that we kind of were giving up in Canada was the ability to think of it as, this outsider thing. Okay, we'll give that up, and we'll treat it with respect, and we'll use it with respect. And so you go to these places, they all have to be clean, and they're all clean for the most part. And they're all like, there's marketing and stuff, and they're still trying to figure it out, and standardization isn't even there yet. And what you get is kind of, I would like more of, I guess what I'm saying is just, I want more of that pharmaceutical,
the professional aspect.
Professionalism. And like, that's when I say this all the time, professionalism beats enthusiasm hands down every time, no matter what.
Always the pragmatist.
Well, I learned that at my wedding, actually. It's like, I want everything to be great. But then I'm just like, no, this woman knows what she's doing. I'm just going to let her do it. Oh, the DJ, he knows what he's doing. He's just like, I got you. And then I learned that lesson really in a good way, not like I should have known, but so
just moving on then from, I'm just going to explain some more of the chemicals that go into it. And then I'll talk a bit about how they help people.
Yeah. Thank you for trying to end my ramble there.
Sorry. The two main ingredients that most people are looking for is cannabidiol, which is usually referred to as CBD because it's too hard to say. So it's C like Charlie, B like Beta, D like Delta. CBD has been known, but not extensively studied, to encourage apoptosis in cells, which is the I should die mechanism of a cell. And you might think that that's terrible, but the opposite of that is cancer. When cells are malignant and they proliferate and they cause obstructions like tumors, you want the cells to say, okay, my life's done, my job's done, I need to become fecal matter now. And when they don't do that, you have life-threatening illnesses, and not just cancer, but especially cancer. So apoptosis is really important, and cannabidiol, if at least in petri dishes and colloquially with cancer patients. A lot of times you can actually put a cancer into remission because of CBD. Not every time. It's not a cure for cancer. It's a treatment for cancer. It'll slow the progression because the chemical in the cannabinoid system stimulates apoptosis in all of your cells in your bloodstream, because when you smoke it, it goes into your lungs, and the only thing your lungs do is transfer things into your blood. That's why it's so quick to respond. But cannabidiol itself can be absorbed under the tongue through like concentrates or oils. And that's usually the preferred method of administration, because then you're not getting tar and smoke and carcinogens in your lungs. So most people take cannabidiol because it doesn't get you high, but it does give you a lot of the benefits of the plant itself. Now, the neat thing about cannabidiol, as opposed to THC, and I won't even try to pronounce the tetrahydric blah, blah, blah of THC. THC is usually what people want when, or speak about when they're doing marijuana. That's the euphoric sensation. It's the appetite. It's the sleep. It's all the really active ingredient is THC, but that's not to say it's the only one. It's just the primary active ingredient. That's why we can label it and point it out and say THC content equals potency, because it's that much more effective than the other hundreds of cannabinoids in the plant. But when combined, the THC and the CBD reduces the high you feel from the THC, but gives you all the benefits of the cannabinoids in them, because they're not antagonists of each of themselves, they're agonists. So they promote the chemical structures effects in the body. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. Don't take anything that I say as like medical opinion. I'm just trying to offer some information so you know where to look to verify for yourself what you should be looking for if you're considering trying a treatment that's got some cannabinoid connection to it, whether that's smoking weed or taking oils or anything like that. So the final thing I want to say just on the flower and the potency and all that is the methods of ingestion. You can take THC by eating it. You can still get high, but it's a completely different effect as far as the body goes for the person who's taking it. As I said before, when you smoke it, it's almost instant. You can feel it like within a few seconds, and then its half-life is, I think, 10 to 15 minutes usually. But the effects of it will slowly degrade over the day. So it's not like you'll be fine after 30 minutes. You'll still be high in 30 minutes. And in 2 hours, you'll still be feeling that calming, loose sort of feeling from it. So I think it takes about a month to clear your system through the urine. I'm not positive on that, but if you're doing anything where you need to take a blood test or a drug test or anything like that, just be aware that it's like poppies will come out of your system in a couple days, cocaine in a couple weeks. Marijuana really stays in your system for a long time, even long after you don't feel it anymore. And that's another key indicator that the drug and the plant is beneficial for the body, because if the cannabinoids only caused apoptosis once in a while or relieved anxiety while you were high or something like that, it would only be like an acute treatment, kind of like benzodiazepines are, where you just take it the moment you need it and then it goes away and it fades away. Marijuana staying in your system is actually it's a good sign that if it's an effective treatment for something like cancer, it means no matter how you administer it, it's still getting to the spot that you want it to, and it's got a lasting effect on the body, regardless of whether you're high or not for the rest of that month. Mm-hmm. But it's a good point to point out that it's not just going to flush out of your system. So one, be cautious if you're traveling internationally or if you have a job where you need to take blood tests. But two, that its medicinal effects, even if you don't use it every day, are still very prominent in your body. So if you find effects but you don't like getting high, you could try it maybe once a week, and that might be sufficient to achieve the treatment goals that you set out for yourself. You don't have to take it every day like most medications, which is a plus, because the idea is to not take more than you need for something that's medical. Obviously, recreationally, you can take more if you want, but overdosing is nearly impossible unless you eat pounds of it, like an absurd amount. Unless you're trying to hurt yourself, you won't. The worst effects from it, you might feel a bit nauseous. usually paranoia. So feeling afraid is still a very real thing and it's uncomfortable, but just know that it's not going to hurt you, like physically hurt you. If you do have a bad experience with it, just sit still and wait. Drink water, do nothing. It'll pass. If you don't pass out, like just fall asleep, it'll pass. It's not as dangerous as Tylenol or as I said, benzodiazepines or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that's a really crucial point to note too, because Tylenol is one of the leading killers next to like opioids and alcohol and driving and heart disease actually too.
Driving's like one of the worst.
Yeah, Tylenol is really high up there, and it's the first thing they give everybody in the ER, even in the waiting room before you see a doctor. They'll offer everybody Tylenol and codeine, which I think is insane, but that's their practice, and I'm not a doctor, so what do I know?
Well, they're moving away from it, but I think that's a Megan episode.
Yeah, probably.
One thing I noticed, and now I guess I could get into my thing is, although in response to that, I'm kind of glad to be in Canada now because it's like you've got weed in your system. I'm like, so, oh, Canada. I've been, so one of the reasons that I'm kind of interested in this lately is because I've been dealing with insomnia since I was born. So I've had trouble getting to sleep forever. And there hasn't been any really rhyme or reason to it. I have insomnia when I'm, having good times. I have insomnia during high stress times. I have insomnia when I'm, still have energy at night. I have insomnia when I'm absolutely exhausted. I have no energy left. So I've worked out a bunch of different ways to deal with it. Melatonin it gets me sleepy, but it doesn't relax me. The diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl, will put me to sleep, but I'm groggy the next morning and I'm not doing well. So I said, okay, I'm going to try something different. I tried to I'm very wary of, prescription muscle relaxants, and I'm very wary of, what do you call those?
Antihistamines?
Well, no, diphenhydramine is an antihistamine, but like muscle relaxants or antidepressants. And because
I don't think those are meant for sleep, are they?
They can be.
I know antipsychotics are, but I didn't think antidepressants were.
Well, I don't want to some of them they all come with weird trade-offs, and I'm just I don't want to deal with that. Let's try something
death.
a little. Death, you will die.
May cause death.
Yeah, but at least I'll be asleep. Yeah. But
it's an effective treatment for sleep. Yeah.
There's quicker and easier ways, but oh man, that's going to get us demonetized, isn't it?
Fuck YouTube.
I'm not suicidal, blah, blah, blah. I have too much good stuff going on. Now, including this. Love you guys. Anyway. The thing I was curious about cannabis and specifically CBD. So how I went about it was, I stopped taking. I kept the melatonin. I tried, going to sleep on a day that I didn't have too much responsibility the next day, and I just took some CBD, and then I took a bit of THC, and I just kept increasing the dose to see what it was, how it worked, and I started very, very, very small. The reason I've been taking oil because I don't want to smoke it because I don't want to smoke it. And I don't, it produces more of a smell, and I'm not particularly fond of that smell. Plus I don't know how it would affect my asthma. Either way, oil is what I want. So what I did there was essentially I looked at the available options and saw what would best work for my lifestyle and what I was trying to do and what I wanted. So I timed it because it usually kicks in about 2 hours. What I find is THC gets me giggly. I lose my sense of, I guess the continuum of time, and everything just happens in the moment. And I feel like I understand everything, even though I don't. It triggers my "you get this" feeling in my brain, which was really interesting. Which now, having taken this, I understand that I can see the universe, blah, 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 blah. You understand everything, but when you come out of it, it's all like a dream. So I guess my advice would be, just because you understand it while you're high doesn't mean you actually understand it. Now, what happens is I ended up going to sleep seemingly naturally, and I got up naturally and had energy. And this is not a do this, you can have this too. This works for me. But I'm essentially showing that I'm not becoming a, gangster. I'm not breaking Coke bottles and drinking the glass. We're going to post that ad in the thing so you guys can see that.
Reefer Madness was hilarious.
Yeah,
I mean, it wouldn't be funny if they didn't take it, or it would be more funny if they didn't take it seriously, but people really believed it.
Yeah. And so what I found out was, I found out through a couple weeks of experimentation what the upper limit was, what the lower limits were, how much CBD and how much THC would put me to sleep comfortably and give me a good, relaxed sleep. And so the way I went about this is the way I think is probably the better way, to do it almost scientifically. And so now I find that a certain number of milliliters of it's on the bottle. I've got it written. And essentially 2 squirts of THC and 2 squirts of the CBD stuff get me to sleep with very little else stuff. And I plan it so that when when I put my head down, there's about 10, 15 minutes before it all kicks in. So, and this seems to work. Not 100% because, I still have insomnia, but it gets my body to settle down. Now, if anyone, and a lot of you do know me, you know how high energy I can be sometimes. So you can understand my problem.
Sometimes,
here.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Only about 95% of the time.
When I'm not sleeping.
Yeah. Even then. So, I'm usually very, very hesitant to try things like this. For a long time, I didn't even take Advil or even Tylenol, like we were just talking. I was like, painkillers, I can suffer through this. I think I went through H1N1 and I took like 2 Advil, but, which looking back was stupid. It wasn't cause like, I'm going to do this and it's going to be hardcore. It's like, I had that very like, anti-pharmaceutical, which was anything.
But can I just make a point there? Mm-hmm. I don't think it's at all stupid to have a personal preference. And the reason I say that is because we don't know enough to say that getting H1N1, for instance, and letting your body fix it maybe is more beneficial for you long term. We don't actually know how the body works, and no scientist does. What we know is how certain things work. And when those certain things are useful or productive, we should be free to try them and make a decision for ourselves what's good and what's not. I started smoking marijuana when I was very young, and without a doctor's help or anything, I didn't do it responsibly for the first little bit. But having needed it, it was such a huge relief that no matter what people were saying, it was so terrible, I couldn't possibly believe them because I could feel the benefit. I knew it was helping me sleep, and when I was underweight, it was helping me eat. And when I had my OCD tensions or whatever, my ritual loops and stuff I fall into, it breaks stuff like that and helped me live a normal life long before there was like approved uses for it. Mm-hmm. And I say that because not to boast or brag that I was doing it, because I'm not proud of it. I was mostly ashamed of it. I didn't mostly talk to my friends or do it in front of my friends for years. What was really terrible in like looking back in hindsight is that they made me feel guilty for seeking help for a medical condition. Mm-hmm. I think that is heinous in and of itself. Like that is a problem for us as a society, when patients feel guilty for being sick.
Yeah.
And especially kids. But I wanted to point out that I don't think it's wrong for people to choose not to take certain medications, because technically we don't know everything. But when things help, I think the worst thing we can do is discourage people or make them feel like piles of trash, like Ainslinger did.
The thing is that we do know a lot, and what we do know is that this works and does this specific thing. But the problem is that we do know a lot about a lot of things, but we should know more about this. And we're only starting to do, as a society in Canada and in America, we're only starting to do tests. But the problem with the tests is that they're, we need people who smoke marijuana, but a lot of times they're going to these people. And honestly, I don't have a very high opinion of the people who are like, oh, just take marijuana and all society will be solved just because it makes them feel really good. But everyone will have a sense of peace and understanding and love and compassion. It's like, it helps me get to sleep, which I guess makes me more compassionate. When I don't get sleep, I'm not very compassionate, but I don't think it's going to do that. That, and the other side of it is the stoners. And
maybe we should talk about side effects, like the actual negative side effects, instead of just glossing over.
Right. But let me just finish first, because that is worth getting into.
I thought you were getting into that, sorry.
Oh, well, yeah, this will get there. But one of the things is that a lot of these studies that are being done right now are being done only by people who are already in the culture. We're not doing it on we need to get a bunch of senior citizens who have never taken it before. We need to be approaching this scientifically. But right now we're only taking people who have a long, long history of marijuana use, and they're going to be very biased. When what we need isn't bias, we need data. And we know it's beneficial. We just need to know why it's beneficial. We don't need more studies saying marijuana is great, check mark. No, we need to know the mechanisms. We need to know how it affects different people, because like you said, it makes some people paranoid, but then in other people, it makes them feel like everything is like, what was it you said to me? It's just the feeling of euphoria, manic euphoria. And it feels good. I didn't get that. Maybe I did and just didn't enjoy it. Just like, but
for me, it's closer to a feeling of relief than euphoria. But I could imagine if somebody was always feeling relief, like they didn't have medical problems, a chronic illness or whatever, then they would probably.
Well, and if you're not dealing with
euphoric.
If you're not dealing with your real world problems, and you got stress from dealing with your problems or not dealing with them, which is actually more stressful, then you take this, you hit it, you feel that relief, and then you're relieved. Nothing, there's no problems. And then you just you're not doing this is not responsible. You need to fix your problems before you get high. Because that also makes the high better, because, if you go into it relaxed, well, guess what? You're going to be more relaxed when it hits you. It's similar with acid and stuff. If you take it and you're having a bad day, you're going to have a bad trip. But again,
everybody's different.
Everyone's different. Even we don't know why. Because we haven't done the studies, and right now we're only starting the studies. So let's move into side effects. Besides,
maybe we could take a bit of a break.
Yeah,
I gotta run.
Okay, I also have to.
When we come back from the break, then we'll discuss some of the side effects and where we think marijuana is going in the future, culturally, socially,
into
personally,
space.
medically, all that kind of jazz.
Space.
Again.
All right.
See you. Come back for part 2.